So I just want to give a quick update on the um, class I had yesterday, or the interview I had yesterday with Paul. You can find it on YouTube. Yeah, so there it is down here. But out of it, I'm going to bring up this map. So we were talking about bridging the gap recovery in the professional space, so building recovery capital within the workplace. And out of the conversation, these I've created this mind map around some of the things that we spoke about. So we've got barriers and challenges, support frameworks, strategic solutions, and global context. And I do hope you get to watch the video, but out of that came stigma and shame as being one of the problems, systemic disconnects, and workplace myths. So let's look at stigma and shame. So fear of judgment from peers, yeah, that's an understandable fear of being a bad parent. So if you share your story of what's going on at home, it can in fact impact how you're showing up at the workplace because you're carrying shame about the chaos that's happening at home, and you can't fulfill your job and do your role correctly because you can't speak authentically about what's going on, which might impact you in your role, and executive isolation and ego. So executives often feel that they can't go and get therapy or support or get help around something because they think it's going to impact how people are going to see them. And I wouldn't use the word ego, that seems a bit shaming, but leadership can be very lonely. So systemic disconnect, so siloed approaches to treatment, treatments that are like this don't work very well, disconnected EAP providers, and academic versus workplace context. And so that's about people not understanding what it's like on the job. And then we have the myths. So belief that we don't have a problem, the organization is in denial about the problem within their workforce and how mental health impacts productivity, always putting out the fire, so focus on crisis rather than recovery, assumption that HR solves everything. We've got a problem here, let's send it to HR. So those are some of the things that came out. So let's talk about solutions now. Peer support models, which is always very good. Peer support being recovery navigators. If this happens, do this, do this, do this. So in the workplace, peer support navigators know where the solutions are. They can bring their story to the team, and then the importance of boundaries and training. So I'm here at work to do a job. I'm not here at work to be your therapist. So where are the lines? Where are the boundaries? Recovery capital, we all know what that is. What are the resources that are available to people? And what kind of social development is there? So as opposed to finishing work, going to the pub after work, what other solutions are there available? Tapping into people's strengths and using the workplace as a landing strip. So you're coming back into the workplace from treatment. And then, of course, there's multiple pathways to recovery. So moving beyond that 12-step approach, mutual support group, and then treatment that is culturally sensitive to different people, different organizations. Yeah. Strategic solutions. So how can you work on the workplace culture, educating management and leadership, normalizing these type of conversations, supporting the whole team. So taking a systemic approach to it, not just individuals. Now, the role of technology, this you can tell I love technology, but reducing isolation via online groups, enhancing human relationships, and capturing shared wisdom. Yeah, so using tech to capture wisdom of that specific team. And then community of practice, what have we got here? Small groups, adult learning. So create circles of learning where people can learn, ongoing micro learning. So it's not like we go here and then we get the training, and then we go back to here. We rather learn within the toxic environment. Maybe I shouldn't use the word toxic, but we learn in the environment to build resources within that environment. And collaborating, working together, and storytelling is really good for identification. And then in the global context, South Africa is very similar to British Columbia in terms of getting the work done, but English is the fourth language. So being aware that employee assistance programs or workplace interventions need to kind of understand that, bypassing university bottlenecks. And what I mean by that is not waiting for some academic professional to come into a very under-resourced environment, finding ways to build resources within the environment. So the professionalization of case managers, and and there we've got a public benefit organization to do that. And in British Columbia, there was the construction industry. So what do we need for our specific industry? So substance abuse and safety. Safety is way more important than if people are kind of using or not using. Whereas in maybe advertising or the movie industry, people are a lot more forgiving, or it's kind of encouraged in a way for substance use. Safety sensitive environments, and aligning with the British Columbia Safety Alliance. So this is a great example of around how taking that online training, that online interview, and now turning it into content. So the next thing I want to show is the infographic. So here's a picture now that speaks 1,000 words, and you can see transforming the workplace by building a recovery landing strip. So often people go to the crisis, to the problem. So here we go, late stage interventions, barrier and stigma, and the context gap. People don't understand the external support services, often lack what's happening in the workplace. And talking about the solution here, peer support navigators, meeting people, bringing them back into the workplace environment, and the environment understand what's going on, because the environment will be impacted. So just like when people are in the work environment, it's the same for when an individual leaves treatment and goes back to the family environment. So there are some of the things there. And then finally, just going to whiz through this presentation that was created by this. So let's just play that and just, so a recovery informed workplace, bridging the critical gap between clinical treatment and sustainable employment through peer support and social capital, the hoptator failure mode, passing the problem through the system. You can see from this diagram, crisis on the floor, manager doesn't know what to do, sends it to HR outsources it to, and the gap between the external EAP and in the workplace environment is too big. So beyond the clinical remission, so that's the medical view, which is a tiny part of it, but the lived reality is a lot more. So recovery that ignores the workplace is incomplete. We spend most of our waking hours at work, which is a very, very important thing. So like we spend a lot of time at work and thinking about work when we're at home as well. So let's keep going. This is the context mismatch. So here's the EAP counselor working in a 9-to-5 environment, and here's the worker in British Columbia working -20, deadline, macho culture, no work, no pay. Yep, and the worker doesn't hang up, it doesn't engage in the intervention because there's no connection. But how can we bring this EAP into our workplace strategy for the well-being of our employees? And there's a landing strip paradigm. The person takes off from the center. They've got a whole lot of skills and everything, and then they come back to the environment that hasn't changed. Yeah, it's the same as like someone goes off for taken out of a polluted fish bowl. They go into clean water, fresh fish bowl. They do very well there, and then they go back to the toxic environment. What we want to start doing is cleaning up the fishbowl. Peer support recovery navigators, training people within the organization to support and guide people in the area. And this isn't just substance abuse, this is kind of mental health, well-being in general. Just like this is how to do things around here. This is how you get support, and it's not rocket science. I think it's just we need to reintroduce this stuff into our environment, and just get clarity around role definition and what that is. The science of connection, clinical authority, it creates distance, whereas peer affinity, oh, you know what it's like. So, we're under pressure, working in this environment, and this is going on, and you've got the home problems. Yeah, I get it. My wife is also freaking out, blah, 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 blah. There's connection there. But often with the clinical authority here, there's often that ZPD, that big gap. And yeah, two continents, one universal truth. The human need for connection, and it's very similar when you sit in containers in environments where people from diverse backgrounds are coming together and they're sharing their story and witnessing the story. Actually builds connection because people are our the problem is the same for various families. So in British Columbia, the worker is isolated by bureaucracy. In South Africa, is the worker is isolated by resources. In both contexts, isolation is the enemy. The solution, a navigator to interpret the system, is identical. And yeah, so then we come up to the systemic model where we're looking at the worker, the workplace, and the family, and coaches need to be able to understand this stuff. So you cannot treat a worker in a vacuum. If a company says we don't have a problem, they are ignoring what comes through the gate every morning. So, leadership from policy to culture. The old way is prescriptive policy. The new way is working with the culture and using coaching to leaders use coaching as a skill set to influence the culture. That's where recovery coaching does well. And management's role is not to be therapists, but to spot the struggle and to point the navigator without judgment. So the guardrails, support versus therapy, coaching, navigating, future focus, strength based, resource linking, peer led, clinical therapy, past focus, diagnosing, trauma treatment, professional only. Warning, lived experience without training is a liability. Navigators must have strict boundaries to avoid harm. And technology as a connector, the trap, using tech as a tick box exercise, spreadsheets and reports, the opportunity, breaking isolation in remote areas, rural Essex or the Copper Belt, facilitating the initial connection so human rapport can be built. And case study is we did this work with judges in Zambia, and after doing the training, they came together and they created their own support group to combat the loneliness of being a judge in Zambia, which I think is a fantastic case study. So the return of investment of recovery. So in the beginning, it gets a bit difficult to do this stuff, but after a while, we start to move forward. You get better. The return of investment is retention. The worker who returns supported often becomes the most loyal employee. That is very true. A recovered employee is safer and more focused, and team dynamics, acknowledging the team's frustration during the absent prevents resentment. A recovered team is a productive team. So the team also gets impacted by the person's behavior, and it takes time to build the team and get the team to work together again. And here's an implementation roadmap: sustain communities of practice, avoid conference folder syndrome, keep the culture alive through micro learning, so continuous learning moving along, provide boundaries and resource training guardrails, so role clarity, and select peer navigators with lived or learned experience to support the development of the culture within the organization. So recovery is a competitive advantage. If you bring this in and invest in this in your workplace, it makes you more competitive. So everyone wins in this environment. Collaboration creates a cultural shift, moving from addiction is the end to recovery is the beginning. Collaboration creates a cultural shift, moving from addiction is the end to recovery is the beginning. So thank you, Paul, for your wisdom here, and thank you, technology, for making this available. And I almost lost my speech there. Thanks for watching.